All right, so I wanted to give my review on The Woman King. When I first saw the trailer, I was hyped, ready to see that because a few years ago, I was having a discussion with my wife about, I wish they made movies about Africa that predated the slave trade. While this doesn't necessarily do that, it takes a step in the right direction because I would like to see, just a glimpse of African way of life as far as traditions and customs and things like that. Like you see in movies like Braveheart and how things were back in, ancient Ireland, or movies about Rome and movies like one of my favorite movies, Gladiator. Just to give a production to your imaginations. Um, so I always wanted that from Africa. We've seen the Lord of the Rings and all those other things, and I would like to see African empires and African kingdoms and a screenplay that came to the big screen. So for that, I appreciate The Woman King. So we know that there's controversy around this movie. Anytime there's a black cast and it centers around slavery, there's always a controversy. That's just the way it is in America. Look how Birth of a Nation brought up Nate Turner's criminal record when nobody cared about it until that movie dropped. So I'm not talking about controversies and historical inaccuracies. I go to movies for an experience and for entertainment. I don't watch movies for history. That's what history books are for. When 300 came out, when Gladiator came out, no one went and did a history search. But when movies like this come out, that's when everybody wants to be historians. Indeed, of course, this movie is historically inaccurate. We all know that. We read the YouTube comments. It is what it is. I'm reviewing this movie based just on the fact that it's a movie. So I want to start off. Well, let me just give the spoiler as far as what I think of this movie. I give this movie a C plus. But now, first, let's talk about the pros. Let's talk about what I liked about this movie. This is what I loved most about this movie. It was the pre-war ceremony on the heel of Viola Davis' speech. Throughout this movie, it shows war dances and chants and all that great stuff. But I really feel like it climaxed right after Viola Davis' speech. And one of the head honchos in this group, this chick goes, man, she nailed her role. Like she came off intimidating, intense. But back to that warrior ceremony. Like, okay, let me try to just give you a picture of where it took me. If you have like the game of your life in a football game, and you have that pre-game huddle getting hyped. If you a gym rat like myself, and you tossing weight around, and then your song comes on, that song that gets you amped up. If you about to go to battle, it's that 300 feel. It's that Tupac, that we used to listen to before we got saved. It's that, like, we about to go to war, and the enemy's about to have a bad day, and I put that on my life. It made me want to get my rifle, a Glock 19, order me a Cavalier on Amazon with the helmet. Yeah, all right, I want to come too, because you just got to see that. For me, some people, it might gloss over some people, but for me, that was the most powerful scene of the movie for me, because it was amped up. Let's go get it. This is what I was born for. It's that 300 Spartan type, which reminds me of what I read about as far as my ancestors with Haiti 1804, and when they were fighting the French on that one hill, and one of the generals or the captains of the French army wrote in their journal and how the French stood in awe and how valiant the Haitians fought for their freedom. It's like they treated their lives carelessly. They were fierce. and it came after us in waves. There was an intensity and a animalistic defiance towards our efforts to retake the island and put them back in chains. It's like if you're a warrior, you know how to it's like real recognize real, so to speak. And so in watching that ceremony, that pre-war ceremony, and how that one lady just got amped and hyped, and it got me amped and hyped. So let me let that go, because this is about to make me go to the gym and throw some weight around. So I love that scene. To me, that was it. There's other nice little cute things throughout the movie. Let's go to the cons. Okay. When it comes to movies, anytime they put a love interest in a movie, to me, it takes away 20% of the points. You're already down to 80%. This is a movie about a nation fighting off an enemy. This is the Amazon warrior woman. So when they do this love interest thing, it doesn't make sense. Are we trying to do a Titanic movie, or are we trying to do a fight to the death movie? So I hate when movies do that, unless it's a Titanic movie, or if it's a Marry Me movie with J-Lo, or when it makes sense, like in Django when he was looking for his wife. To me, that makes sense. It didn't take away from the movie. That was the whole purpose of the movie, right? Shoot him up until I find my wife and get her back. And when I find her, whoever took her, they're gonna pay. That makes sense. But in this one, she just meets some fella, pretty boy Ralph with the long hair, looking like he was supposed to be in a Snow White movie. And all of a sudden she catches, enough. I don't know why they keep doing that. Another con, I hate when they do this. When the trailer doesn't match the storyline of the movie. I can't really go into it because I don't want to give spoilers if you haven't seen it. It's like, you see how they cut and slice and dice to put a trailer together. When you watch the actual flick, that's not really the chronological events and who the enemy really is. Which brings me to another thing I liked about this movie. Like, it didn't paint Europe as the bad guy and the villain. Though they exploited the situation, of course. But I appreciate how they owned up to the fact that, half of these females in this army, they're captives. And how, I like how it shows how the biggest problem with Africans in this day and age wasn't the white man, but it was the other Africans. That we reduced our brother to a commodity and sold him, and therefore enriched our empires. So that leads me to my biblical perspective of this flick, which is, this is how it always goes. I sold my brother for 30 shekels of silver. Was not Jesus betrayed by Judas? Was not Joseph betrayed and sold into Egypt by his 11 brothers? So the history of brothers selling brothers is nothing new. And I love how the Bible always highlights that. Brute A2 is what Caesar did as his friend joined in his betrayal as he was being stabbed and killed by his adversaries. And we see how Africa is today. They would have been better equipped to withstand colonialism if they were united, if they never reduced their brother to a commodity. But all that being said, I give this movie a C+. I appreciate all the elements of it. I feel like it me, I'm trained off Braveheart, that type of storyline. I'm trained off Gladiator. I'm trained off this awesome movie I saw once called Warriors of the Rainbow. If you're into movies about people fighting for freedom, fighting for honor, and rebelling against a enemy more powerful than them, a David and Goliath type flick, I really recommend Warriors of the Rainbow. It's 4 hours and 36 minutes, but it feels like it's an hour and a half. And I think they have probably a shorter version of it, but it's about the Taiwanese that rebelled against, I think it was the Japanese invasion, outgunned, outmanned, occupied, and over a series of years they finally put up their rebellion using primitive weapons. So I always love those types of stories. I love underdog stories, and this flick, it was a really underdog story to me. In some respects, it was, because towards the end you see who they fight, which is another African kingdom who were part of the slave trade and raiding other villages and selling them off. So I appreciate the fact how this flick accurately showed, at least, who were the primary aggressor and villain in the exploitation of Africans, which was other Africans. And so is the story of Judas. Short-term gain that led to long-term devastation. Sold my brother for riches, but when I sold my brother, I sold my future. You see, when I sold my brother, I sold my future, because when Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, it turns out that Joseph was actually the one who was the cause of their future salvation. If it was not for Joseph, as Joseph recounts in the end of Genesis, now I know you did it for evil, but God allowed it for good. For his coming there and him being sold into slavery was for the salvation of Israel, in whom the Messiah would eventually descend and save the world, should anyone believe in him. So, Jesus said that there's no greater love than for a man to lay down his life for his friend. And towards the end of the movie, I was thinking to myself, man, what if a few nations fought back and united, and not just fought back against Europe? Honestly, they didn't necessarily need to fight back against Europe. What they needed to do was to wipe out all the other African nations that partook in the slave trade and take all those ports and unite that region. And should anyone come, you destroy them and you send them back with the plague, that they never step foot on the continent of Africa again. You put the fear of God in them. I'm out. That's my time. As always, repent if you haven't, and definitely believe.